Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new F123 tutorial. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to use the battery, otherwise known as the ERS deployment, more efficiently. As you can see in the center of your screen, you've got the 100% battery as we are on the starting grid, and you have got the overtake button, and we're going to be highlighting the really important essences of how to use these in a more effective manner, as I've seen quite a lot of times people not use the battery in the most effective way, and I want to do my best to help you out today. So I'm going to be breaking it down into some simple, just very easy to understand tips and techniques that can be assisting you at home. And first of all, breaking it down with track usage, and then we'll get into some overtaking situations and some racing scenarios that can be helping you as well. So as you can see, we're here on Imola. And the reason that we are on Imola is simply because it's one of the best tracks to demonstrate differences in ERS usage and how you can be more efficient. So if you look at the mini-map to the left-hand side of your screen, you can see that Imola is filled with very much short straights, apart from the main straight, of course. It's filled with many short straights that lead into very technical sections that are quite relatively slow in all things comparison to the speed that you carry on the straight. So what I will be breaking down is the different straight sizes and how you can be using it to your advantage. For example, battery and the ERS is more efficient when you're leading onto a long straight, because the speed that you will gain out of the corner will be deployed and used over a longer amount of time. And for example, a very short straight like this, where it's about 200 meters from the exit of the chicane, will be very ineffective to use the ERS deployment, quite simply because the straight is so short and so insignificant towards lap time that using the battery is going to have less of an impact. Whereas up the hill here, you can see the straight is going on for quite considerably a bit longer. What naturally ends up in a result that if you use 10% of your battery on the exit of the hairpin, you'll have a longer straight to gain that advantage over. And this situation will play itself out time over time again as we're driving around the Imola track, heading up into the chicane right now. And as you can see, we're coming out of what would be the slowest, one of the slowest corners actually on the track, shared with the hairpin in sector 2. And now also is an okay place to use your battery, because you have a decently sized straight coming after this traction zone. But without doubt, the best place to use battery here on the Imola track is here on the pit straight. Simply because if you're using battery on the exit here, you have such a long time to deploy the battery, and then also the speed that I mentioned earlier is carried all the way down the straight, and you're able to use that momentum gained. Remember, in Formula 1, especially all car racing in general, you have more opportunity to gain speed under acceleration than generally you do at top speed in most cases applied. Of course, there are very unique scenarios that you're able to gain more on the top speed, but generally in pretty much every scenario in Formula 1 cars at least, the speed that you gain on acceleration will be generally outweighing the time advantage that you can gain at the top speed as well. So this is why using the battery out of low speed corners that lead on to significant straights can be helping you to be more effective with the battery. And coming onto these micro straights and quite small straights, using the battery has a very small advantage to you, because you simply do not have that long of a straight to use the advantage that you have gained over a significant amount of time. The second bit of advice I'm going to be getting into is general overtaking. I'm going to be showing you some demonstrations on the AI, and then I'll be jumping into some online races against actual people to show you more in a real world scenario. So of course, off the line, you're using a lot of battery to try and keep up and find yourself in an attacking position. Once you've found yourself in an attacking position, now you have to determine, okay, do I have a realistic chance of overtaking the car ahead? If I think I have a realistic chance, it's time to use the battery. But if we now look at this on the replay mode, it turns out that I did not have a realistic chance and was using excess of the battery. Let's go into cockpit camera. So you can see we exit the straight and we turn on the battery at 96%. By the time we had used the battery, we had not got alongside and not got into an attacking position of the Haas directly ahead of me, and we have used approximately 10% of the battery. So we have wasted roughly, I'm going to say, about 7% of battery usage. And the reason I say that is I'm also taking into consideration, quite simply, the battery will deplete naturally on the straight, even if you don't use the overtake button. So considering we used the overtake button and we did not gain the position ahead of us, we would have been losing about 7% of the battery, all things considered. So with that covered, you can sort of understand a very basic concept of when to use it in an attacking situation. Oh, you almost crashed into the back of K-Mac. That could have been one for the for the B-reel. Yes, you can understand where you can use battery. And now this is a very good scenario up the hill with the AI. And I'm going to go again into replay camera so I can show you in full depth and detail what happened with Lance Stroll behind us. So now you can also use the battery in a defensive scenario. So generally, it's always good to not lose a position on track. Sounds like an obvious statement, I know, but especially on the opening laps. So now we're going to go on board with Lance Stroll, who I predict, yes, is on his overtake button. So riding on board, you can see Lance Stroll gets a massive momentum gain over us. And if we did not turn on the overtake button coming over the crest of the hill, you see we would have had a massive overlap compared to Stroll, and he probably would have got past us. So this is the exception to my rule of basically not using the ERS at a high-speed scenario. And if you need to defend a position, it can be effective to do so. Remember, generally, track position, especially before DRS has been activated, will be extremely powerful to aiding your ability to do the race in the fastest time possible. So now we're going to be leading on into the pit straight, and then we're going to be showing you some real world scenarios after this as we do one more example with Kevin Magnussen. Coming out of the chicane, we're going to be using a bit of battery, and you can see out of the lowest part of the lowest speed part of the track, using a lot of battery now, and we're going to be leading up into a braking zone. But even with the battery usage, the AI have phenomenal straight line speed, and we're only able to get the move done underneath the braking zone. So, leading on to my final point here against the AI is actually going to be committing to using the battery. So, if you turn on the battery and you're using it like this and you're just wasting down the straight, you can see we use all the battery down the straight and use up so much potential that we could have saved for later. You have to be committed to either using the battery or being smart enough to back out of your overtaking chance fast enough and not to be wasting the battery. Because right now, it's pretty clear with the speed deficit that I have to the car ahead of the Williams, it's going to be pretty difficult to to be in a position to overtake, I should say. And we're not going to be in a position to overtake, even while using the overtake button all the way down the straight. And as you can see, at the end of the straight, we end up at 45% with the battery. Now, if we rewind time back here, we're going to be at the end of the straight, and we are going to be at 62% when hitting the brake pedal. So this is my point exactly. When you are behind a car, just be decisive. Do not waste your battery unnecessarily. Make your decision, and if you see that your opportunity to overtake is very unlikely, even while using the battery, do not hold it all the way down the straight and just wasting your battery potential. With that being said though, if you do get an opportunity to overtake the car ahead, it is more than likely worth using your battery to try and get that move completed. So as you can see now, we're online against some agile people, and I'm going to be able to show you a bit more realistic examples of how the battery usage can work in overtaking scenarios and how not to waste battery over these examples of overtaking, and this should help you in a longer race duration as well. Of course, this is only a 5-lap shootout, but the same rules will apply in a longer race as well. So, getting on ahead, you can see lap 1, a lot of the cars ahead are going to be using battery. I've got no risk for cars behind me overtaking, so I'm better off saving my battery down the straight, and now to use it in a better scenario on the exit of the corner when I'm able to get past multiple cars. If I used my battery down that first straight, I quite simply would have been so close behind the cars ahead of me that I wouldn't have had the opportunity or the space to use up the undercut that I did, and I would have wasted upwards of 10% battery as well. So now you can see we've got a train of cars ahead of me, and this is such a short straight that there's no point in me pressing battery, even if I want to get a little bit closer to them. Didn't need to use battery to get past him. Okay, cheers, buddy. But now you can see we're leading on to what is one of the longest straights, and guess I didn't need to use battery against the Williams either. My point would have been, though, that initially the cars ahead are going to use a lot of battery. So if you can not have risk from the cars behind, like I don't at the moment, again, I can save all of my battery down this straight. Even if the leaders are pushing their battery, I will be able to use a better capacity of battery later in the race, more than to make up for it. And as you can see now, we're starting to close down on the leaders, and we're saving that battery for later in the race. Quite simply because my opportunity to overtake is very low right now. I'm 7 tenths behind, and we've still got multiple laps in this race to try and get the move done. So I don't particularly need to be in a rush. Although, with that being said now, we're under 2 tenths away from the Red Bull ahead, who's going a bit slow for these complex of corners. So now we're looking around the outside just to get the move done. And now using the battery to secure the overtake and get up ahead of him and get into position 2 in this race. And you can see, I thought he was going to go for a little lunge there. But you can see my battery usage is using to a minimum, and it is quite literally only to secure positions once I've got in a good position to overtake them. I'm not wasting battery. Like, a bad use of battery right now would actually be spamming it all the way down this straight. Quite simply because you can see we start the straight at 7, 8 tenths behind, and even if I use battery the whole way down the straight, all I'm going to do is end up at maximum half a second. Oh my god, the wheel just... What was that? Did I get a track limit? Right. What? Right, okay, carrying on with this tutorial, my point would have been, quite simply, that I would have got to the end of the straight, and I wouldn't have really been that close to him, and I would have used up all of my battery doing so, giving me less battery to try and make an overtaking opportunity later in the race, in fact. So we actually have to redo quite a lot of that work again, and using up the example that we're 6 tenths behind, and one of the more critical factors is that DRS has now been enabled on this lap. So the DRS line and detection point is on the exit of the chicane going into Sector 3. So it's completely pivotal and important towards my race here that I can have the DRS on this AlphaTauri up ahead of me, and that will allow me to have a clean overtaking opportunity while having to use a minimal battery down the straight. You can see we are now 3 tenths behind, and we will not be needing to use battery down the straight, and it shall be a very easy overtaking opportunity. Again, just not using any battery and giving myself the best possibility to have more battery potential later in this race, as he tries to hang around the outside quite valiantly, I have to say. And now we're just getting it to the apex, and we are going to be far enough ahead that we won't have to use battery to defend. And the really important factor here is quite simply that we're not wasting battery, and this is how you can really put yourself in the best position to make up places in a race and to ultimately win as many races as you can as well. By doing this sort of strategy, you can see up ahead that the Ferrari was blinking on his rain light. In the dry conditions, what that means is that the car ahead is on under 10% battery, and that puts him or her in a really, really vulnerable position for the rest of the race, especially with coming up to such a long DRS straight. If I wasted all of my battery right now, I would not have the opportunity to go past these cars in a straight line efficiently. And you can see we're right up behind the McLaren, and we're just going to do a very nice switchback. See, what I predict is going to happen at this point, the McLaren is going to use all of the battery down the straight, or what battery is left down the straight, to try and regain the position. I have 60% battery. The Red Bull is using all of the battery as well, what means they're going to be extremely low on battery going into the final lap of the race, whereas I'm going to be much higher on my battery with 60%, and they're going to be more or less defenseless as we go on later into the lap. To show this in prime example, he will use, or he or she will use, the battery up ahead, and you can see the battery is already blinking underneath 10%, and I'm just going to be waiting, I'm going to be chilling, literally just to be using this as a pure example on how I can be using my battery more efficiently and saving it for more critical moments in the race. So I'm not even going to be going for an overtaking opportunity right now, and we're just going to be using all of the battery on the final straight leading up to the start finish line, and that will be how we're going to demonstrate saving the battery can increase your odds of having a better finishing position by being patient. So if we used all of our battery earlier in the race, we simply would not have the battery to do anything right now. But because we were smart, strategical, and used our battery in efficient ways, you can see right now, even on the run up to the start finish line, we're going to be able to blast our battery and get a very easy overtake done as we lead up to the line. Quite simply, we would not have had that opportunity if we used all of the battery early in the race. So, key points to take away from this video is use the battery out of low speed corners that lead on to high speed straights for the greatest efficiency of the battery. And if you want to be overtaking cars, be decisive with your battery usage. Don't waste it all the way down the straight if you see the overtaking opportunity is not working out. Be early to call it. That if you're not going to make the overtake, be early to call it that, okay, time to stop using the battery and save it for a better opportunity later in the race. Don't spam all your battery early in the race, as it will leave you vulnerable, as it did for this McLaren in this example. And with all that being said, hopefully this video did help you and did increase your knowledge of the battery usage in F1 23. With that all being said, thank you so much for watching. I've been Brendon Leigh, and I'll catch you in the next video. Glad to see you. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.